You know that feeling, right? That sense of relief, of calm, when you finally turn the key in your own front door at the end of a long day. You step inside, kick off your shoes and think, "Ah, I'm safe now." But what if that feeling is a lie? What if the very thing you should fear most isn't some shadowy figure lurking in the darkness, but someone who lives just 20 feet away? Someone who waves good morning over the hedge, borrows your tools, and smiles a little too wide? Tonight, we're diving into the true, chilling accounts of 3 people who learned the hard way that neighbor can sometimes just be another word for nightmare. So, go ahead, keep those lights on, maybe double-check the locks because this is about to get seriously ugly. Story 1, The 7-Year Stalker. Athena's endless nightmare. Athena had always dreamed of a little place with a garden, a sanctuary. So, when she found that charming ranch house with the sprawling lilac bushes, it felt like coming home. Those lilacs, they reminded her of her grandmother's yard, of childhood summers, of everything good and safe. It was perfect, or so she thought. Her first week there, she met Dale, the divorce guy next door. He seemed quiet, a little reserved, and then he started being helpful, almost too helpful. Before she even had a chance to unpack, he was mowing the strip of grass between their driveways without being asked. It was a nice gesture, she supposed, if a little boundary crossing. Then came the banana bread. He'd brought it over, still warm, but there was something off about it. It tasted like chalk, a strange, gritty texture that lingered on her tongue. She thanked him politely, of course, because that's what you do. She even tried to set a gentle boundary, a subtle hint that she appreciated the thought but preferred to manage her own lawn and baking. She figured that was that. A minor awkwardness easily resolved. She was wrong. So incredibly wrong. 3 months melted into the summer heat. Athena was settling in, starting to feel truly at home. Then, she walked through her front door one afternoon and felt an immediate, icy dread. Her back door, which she knew she'd locked, was ajar. Just a fraction, but enough to scream intrusion. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stepped inside, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" Silence. A terrifying, heavy silence. Every picture on her wall hung crooked, as if someone had deliberately tilted them. Her couch cushions lay slit open, their stuffing spilling out like grotesque entrails. Nothing was stolen. Not a single valuable item was missing. It was just moved, disturbed, a violation designed purely to unsettle. The police, bless their hearts, wrote it off as a prank. Kids, they said, probably just some neighborhood teens. But Athena knew. Deep down, she knew. When she told Dale about it, he stood on his porch, wearing that same blank, unnerving smile. "People are cruel," he'd said, his voice flat, devoid of any genuine sympathy. It was a statement, not a comfort, a chilling premonition of what was to come. Then the letters started. They weren't just letters. They were ransom notes crafted from magazine clippings, jagged words glued onto cheap paper. "I see you," each one a fresh stab of terror. They'd appear in her mailbox, tucked under her windshield wiper, even, horrifyingly, slipped inside her gym locker. How did he know where she worked out, where she parked? The feeling of being watched became a constant, suffocating presence. She installed security cameras, but all they ever caught was a fleeting glimpse of a hoodie, a pair of gloved hands. Nothing identifiable, nothing actionable. She upgraded her locks to deadbolts, bought a big, goofy German Shepherd mix she named Rocket, hoping his presence would deter. She tried to breathe, to live, but every shadow felt like a threat. One night, Rocket barked himself hoarse, a frantic, desperate sound that tore through Athena's sleep. She let him. Instead, she heard a sharp yelp, then a sickening, absolute silence. Her blood ran cold. She found Rocket on the porch, his tongue swollen, his eyes wide and unseeing. His water bowl, usually pristine, was laced with a sickeningly sweet, iridescent film. Antifreeze. Her loyal, protective Rocket gone. The grief was a physical blow, but beneath it simmered a cold, hard fury. And who should appear at the fence, voice syrupy with false concern? Dale. Some folks just hate animals, he'd murmured, his eyes wet with what Athena was sure was thinly veiled pride, gleaming in the porch light. She couldn't prove it, couldn't prove a thing, but she knew. Years rolled on like that, a relentless, suffocating tide of harassment. Athena tried to escape. Her job transferred her twice, offering a glimmer of hope for a fresh start, a chance to outrun the nightmare. Both times, Dale appeared. In her new city, he'd be there, sipping coffee across the street from her office, a silent, menacing sentinel. He obtained her unlisted phone numbers, somehow. Takeout she never ordered would show up at her door, signed with her name. She'd find herself suddenly subscribed to obscure magazines, her address plastered on mailing lists she'd never joined. Restraining orders piled up, a mountain of legal paper meant to protect her. But Dale treated them like suggestions, not laws. He violated them, spent weekends in jail, and walked out whistling, a perverse victor. The system, designed to protect, felt utterly powerless against his relentless obsession. In year 6, the harassment escalated to outright terror. Athena's garage, her sanctuary for hobbies and quiet projects, became a target. She woke one night to the piercing shriek of fire alarms, the acrid smell of smoke filling the air. Firefighters found a gas can on the sill, a rag stuffed into its spout, an accelerant trail leading straight from her garage door, across the property line, and into Dale's yard. But, of course, the security cameras, the ones she'd installed after Rocket, had conveniently shorted out that night. No footage, no proof. The insurance paid for the damage, but the psychological cost was immeasurable. And then came Dale's sympathy card, a grotesque mockery. Hope you're warmed by everyone's kindness. The sheer audacity, the chilling taunt, left her feeling utterly hollowed out. Athena finally sold the house, cutting her losses, abandoning her dream. She moved across the state, a desperate attempt to vanish. She changed her name, rented a small studio apartment, and worked nights, hoping to blend into the anonymity of the city. For a while, there was peace, a fragile, tentative peace. Then, one evening, at a laundromat she'd chosen precisely for its out-of-the-way location, she glanced in the mirror. And there he was, Dale, folding shirts like he'd lived there forever, his eyes catching hers in the reflection. That blank, unsettling smile. The blood drained from her face. This time, she didn't hesitate. She called 911, recorded everything she could, and testified through tears, every raw nerve exposed. This judge finally saw the truth. He sentenced Dale to 5 years. As the courtroom cameras flashed, Dale turned, his eyes locking with Athena's, and he gave her his parting grin. "See you soon," he mouthed. 7 years of her life dissolved into that single, chilling smile. She still checks the peephole twice before opening the door, still flinches at the sight of banana bread. Someday Dale will be free, and Athena will be waiting not for justice, not for closure, but just for sunrise, hoping each new day brings another dawn without him. Story 2, 4th of July Showdown. When fireworks turned to fear, Marcus loved the 4th of July. He didn't just like it, he loved it. For him, it wasn't just a holiday. It was an annual tradition, a vibrant, explosive celebration of freedom and joy. He'd save all year, meticulously planning his arsenal of fireworks, the kind that could rattle windows 3 blocks away and paint the night sky with breathtaking bursts of color. His street in Central Florida was mostly retirees, and yeah, they grumbled a bit about the noise, the smoke, the occasional rogue sparkler. But mostly, they accepted it as Marcus's yearly spectacle, a quirky part of their quiet neighborhood. Everyone, that is, except for Mr. Harkin. Mr. Harkin lived in the house that stayed perpetually silent and dark during the festivities. He was a retired prison guard, a man whose lawn was always shaved to carpet height, whose porch light was always off. He was a silent, brooding presence, a stark contrast to Marcus's boisterous joy. He'd never complained directly, not in so many words, but there was always that unspoken disapproval radiating from his perfectly manicured yard. The afternoon of the 4th, the air was thick with anticipation. Marcus, with his usual infectious enthusiasm, set up his PVC tubes in the cul-de-sac, lining up the mortars like artillery. Kids from around the block circled on their bikes, eyes wide with excitement. The smell of charcoal drifted from nearby barbecues, mingling with the scent of anticipation. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Marcus lit the first fuse. Whistle, boom! A magnificent shell burst, painting the darkening canvas with a dazzling display of red, white, and blue. Cheers erupted from the gathered crowd, a symphony of delight. Then, out of the deepening shadows of his perfectly manicured lawn, Harkin strode. Shirtless, his gaunt frame silhouetted against the fading light, a revolver tucked menacingly into the waistband of his shorts. His eyes, Marcus noticed with a jolt, were lit like furnace doors, burning with an unsettling intensity. "One more pop and I start popping back," he barked, his voice cutting through the festive atmosphere like a knife. The sudden shift in tone, the sight of the gun, sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. Parents instinctively scooped up their toddlers, their faces etched with concern. Marcus, though, initially just laughed. He thought it was bravado and old man's bluster. He lit the next fuse, a mischievous glint in his eye. Whistle, bang! A glittering palm tree of light exploded in the sky, met with renewed cheers. But before the echo of the explosion could even die away, Harkin moved. He yanked the gun from his waistband, the metallic glint catching the residual light from the fireworks. He racked the slide with a chilling, deliberate clack, empty, as it turned out, but nobody knew that in the moment. Nobody knew if it was loaded or not. He aimed it directly at Marcus, his face contorted with rage. Then, with a sudden, violent motion, he swung the gun toward Marcus's boyfriend, Jay, who was filming the whole scene on his phone. "You want stars? I'll give you stars," Harkin snarled, shoving Jay hard enough to crack the phone screen, sending it skittering across the pavement. Jay stumbled back, his arms raised in a gesture of surrender, his face pale with shock. Someone screamed, "Gun!" The festive crowd scattered, diving behind cars, their evening of joy shattered by terror. Marcus froze, the wick of another firework still burning in his hand, his mind reeling. The police arrived within minutes, sirens wailing, their flashing lights adding to the surreal horror of the scene. Harkin, surprisingly, surrendered the weapon willingly. It was, as the officers confirmed, unloaded, and chillingly, no serial number had been filed off. It was just a regular, albeit terrifying, gun. They cuffed him, and he smiled the whole ride away, a serene, almost triumphant expression on his face. This wasn't just a dispute, it was something darker. Court filings began to fly. Marcus, still shaken by the incident and reflecting on months of unsettling behavior from Harkin, requested an injunction for protection against stalking. He cited a pattern of vague threats that had, until now, seemed merely annoying. Slashed patio furniture, nails strategically placed in his driveway, cryptic notes slipped under his door that simply read, "Keep it quiet." He believed Harkin's actions that night were the culmination of a long-standing campaign of intimidation. The trial hinged on a frustrating legal technicality. Did shoving Jay count as stalking Marcus? And were the two acts, the threat with the gun and the physical push, separate enough to prove a pattern of stalking? The judge, in a decision that left Marcus and Jay reeling, ruled them one continuous episode. This meant that, legally, it didn't constitute the two or more incidents required to prove a pattern of stalking. The stalking claim was dismissed. However, Harkin was sentenced to probation for assault, a minor slap on the wrist for what felt like a direct threat to their lives. As he walked out of the courthouse, Harkin winked at Marcus, a chilling, triumphant glint in his eyes. "Next year I bring the fireworks," he said, his voice a low, menacing whisper. That was it, the final straw. Marcus sold the house before Memorial Day, the memory of Harkin's smile and the terror of that 4th of July forever tainting his home and his love for the holiday. Story 3: Survey Stakes and Sledgehammers. The war on the property line. Heather and Leo had finally found it, their forever home. A charming, rustic house nestled on a wooded acre, a peaceful retreat where deer grazed at dawn, and the chirpy realtor had promised a life of serene tranquility. It was everything they'd ever wanted, a place to raise their kids, to grow old together. But paradise, they soon discovered, came with a very particular set of neighbors: the Doyles. The Doyles were a couple in their 60s, and they were memorable. Their property boasted a fleet of rusted trucks, each one a testament to years of neglect, slowly sinking into the overgrown weeds. And then there were the dogs. 3 unleashed hounds, a motley crew of various breeds, who roamed freely, leaving paw-print murals across everyone's pristine flower beds. Heather, a meticulous gardener, knew immediately that a fence was in order, not just for aesthetics, but to keep the dogs out and her children safe. Their first weekend in the house, full of optimism, Heather hired a surveyor to flag the lot line. The professional, crisp yellow flags went up on Monday, marking the precise boundary between their dream and the Doyles' chaos. By Tuesday, every single marker had vanished. In their place, brazenly planted like flags on newly conquered territory, were the Doyles' grimy lawn chairs. It was a direct, unmistakable act of defiance. And it was just the beginning. Mr. Doyle, a hulking man with a perpetual scowl, stood on his porch, filming Heather on his phone. "Look at the little girl stealing land," he narrated in a sneering voice, loud enough for her to hear. Mrs. Doyle, a woman with a surprisingly piercing shriek, would yell obscenities over her morning coffee, her words cutting through the quiet like a chainsaw. She called Heather's kids soft snowflakes who deserve the real world, a chillingly personal attack that stung Heather to her core. Heather, trying to navigate this bizarre new reality, phoned the sheriff. She explained the vanishing markers, the verbal abuse, the feeling of being targeted. The sheriff, polite but unhelpful, advised civil court. "It's a property dispute, ma'am," he'd said. "We can't get involved unless there's a clear threat of violence." He warned against escalation, as if the Doyles weren't already doing exactly that. That night, the Doyles took his advice in their own twisted way. At 2 a.m., the ear-splitting roar of chainsaws ripped through the peaceful night. They were cutting brush, not on their side, but on Heather's, stacking the freshly severed limbs into bizarre, menacing pyramids right at the disputed property line. Then, as if to underscore their contempt, they spray-painted the remaining survey stakes neon orange and, with a terrifying accuracy, hurled them through Heather's open garage like javelins. Leo, Heather's husband, had had enough. He installed cameras, hoping to capture proof of their escalating harassment. The footage was damning and utterly chilling. One clip showed Mrs. Doyle, a ghostly figure creeping across the frost-covered lawn at dawn, a can in her hand. She poured motor oil directly onto the children's swing set, a vile, deliberate act of malice aimed squarely at their family. Another clip, even more terrifying, caught Mr. Doyle. He was swinging a sledgehammer, a heavy, brutal tool, against the shared retaining wall that supported their home's foundation. Each blow resonated like a heartbeat, each impact bringing them closer to a catastrophic collapse. Lawyer letters were drafted, stern warnings about property rights and harassment. But the Doyles, unfazed, countersued for adverse possession, claiming they'd maintained the disputed strip for decades, a brazen lie designed to drag Heather and Leo into a protracted legal battle. Court dates dragged on, an endless cycle of filings and motions, bleeding their savings and their sanity. Meanwhile, the harassment tightened its grip, becoming more insidious, more personal. Floodlights were aimed directly at their bedrooms, bathing their nights in an unnatural, disturbing glow. Radio static was cranked to maximum volume, blasting through their windows at all hours. Car batteries, vital for getting to work and school, were stolen the night before big court hearings, a clear attempt to disrupt their lives and intimidate them further. The breaking point arrived one December evening. Heather's 8-year-old son, excited to ride his new bike, found a note taped to the seat. His small hand held it up, confused. Heather took it, her blood running cold as she read the crudely scrawled message. "Tell mommy walls burn." The direct threat, aimed at her child, was a visceral punch to the gut. She called 911 again, her voice shaking with a mixture of terror and rage. This time, the deputies took it seriously. They searched the Doyle's shed, discovering 5-gallon cans of kerosene and, horrifyingly, a crude map of Heather's roofline. The charges escalated from harassment to attempted arson. The Doyles paid bail, a disturbingly quick transaction, and returned home, smiling. The trial still looms, a long, arduous battle ahead. But for now, a restraining order keeps them 100 yards away, a fragile paper barrier between sanity and madness. Heather keeps the original survey stakes in a drawer, not as mementos, but as war medals, grim reminders of the battle they've endured. She replanted them last spring, bright yellow flags fluttering defiantly in the breeze, while the Doyles glared from their porch, bound by paper yet still free to watch, to judge, to resent. Heather no longer waves. She simply counts the days until the gavel falls, hoping it will finally lock the cage she already feels around her life. A cage built by the very people who should have been her neighbors. If any of these stories crawled under your skin, if they made you check your own windows, or maybe just glance nervously at your next-door neighbor, then hit that like button. Let YouTube know you're hungry for more nightmare fuel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell. We're bringing you new true horror every single week. Got your own neighbor from hell story? Something that keeps you up at night? Email me at horrorstories@gmail.com. We might just turn your chilling experience into our next video. Until then, stay safe out there, lock your doors, and honestly, maybe invest in some really good, thick curtains. You never know who's watching. 3 houses, 3 seemingly ordinary blocks, 3 harrowing reasons to double-check before you smile next door. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? That the most terrifying monsters aren't always found in dark alleys or abandoned buildings, but sometimes they're just on the other side of your fence, living a life that intersects with yours in the most horrific ways. Night falls fast when familiarity breeds monsters. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one if we're lucky.